Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Day 2, 40 days of 4VKM. And we're covering episode 2 today, and there's a lot of twos that are in this story here. Starting with the release date of the second episode, which was on 2/22/2020, the day after the first 4VKM, and the last time that 2 VKMs were dropped back-to-back days. So, this video is titled, "The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming." How many years do we have to listen to that bullshit about Russia, right? You had clowns like Keith Olbermann. You had clowns like Stephen Colbert. You had clowns like Jimmy Kimmel, which shout out to that guy last night on SmackDown with the Kimmel on the list sign. The guy's my hero. So, shout out to him. Hopefully he's seen some 4VKMs himself. But for years, we had to listen to people like Adam Shifty Shift, a.k.a. Andy Kaufman, allegedly. We can't confirm that, but sure does look like him. And we just had to listen to these lies and lies and lies, Russia. Now, when we think about it, when did it really start to escalate? Do you guys remember? It was on the campaign trail. I want to say it was July 2016. And Trump was doing a press conference, and he said, "Russia, if you're listening, if you want to find Hillary's 33,000 missing emails, have at it. I'm sure you'll find some funny stuff in there." I remember listening to that live, and I popped. I laughed. I remember being in my car, listening to it. I said, "Oh, shit, I can't believe he said that. That's hilarious," right? But did I know that they were going to take that and turn this into this monster of Russia? I don't think anybody of us expected it. And then when you fast forward now here, 2024, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and all this stuff? It's funny how it all comes back around. So going to the episode on 2/22/2020, we talk about Russia and really where were the origins before Trump made that statement. How long were they planting the seeds of dissent with Russia and the United States? Well, if you go back and you do your history, you'll know that Russia was actually a great friend to the United States for many, many years. Helped us out in the Revolutionary War, helped us out in World War I. They came around in World War II. So for the most part, and now out of World War II, Russia and the United States emerged as the two superpowers. And the powers that be, the forces behind the scenes, they just couldn't let the United States and Russia be cool anymore. Because at the end of the day, it hasn't really worked out in their interests throughout history. So when we think about that, you think about the Bolshevik Revolution that happened in 1917, somewhere around that time. And that was funded by liberal elites in New York. And essentially that they financed the whole operation and turned Russia commie. And, that's kind of how they just destroyed generations of Russian culture and Russian families, and just not good. And it started later on, the Cold War, where, again, they wanted to use Russia as a proxy to, build up the military-industrial complex, right? They have nukes, we have nukes. We need more money for more nukes, right? So all that stuff kind of fed into the military-industrial complex machine. Then you have President Kennedy. President Kennedy had several challenges when he was president. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, and there's that great film with Kevin Costner, 13 Days, which really kind of highlights the decision process that he had to kind of go through. He had to sift through disinformation, and he had to really utilize back channels with the Russians in order to prevent a major conflict. And that's what they wanted, was a major conflict. So Russia. What else was going on with Russia? If you go back to the 2012 presidential election between Mittens, Pierre Delecto, Romney, and Barack Obama, there's that famous line where Obama kind of makes fun of Romney. He's like, the 1980s called. They want their foreign policy back because Russia's not a threat. Da, 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 da. Well, how funny is that? Obama saying Russia's not a threat, and then a couple years later, Russia, 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 right? So fast forward a couple years after 2012, Obama's back in president, and you get to 2014. And in 2014, you have the MH17 flight go down over Ukraine. And they blamed immediately Russia on this. Now, to put some perspective on the wrestling side of things, during this time, I thought it was very interesting. They were building up a Russian character, right? So it's the ravishing Russian Lana and the Bulgarian brute, who was her wrestler, Rusev. So what they did is they were getting massive heat. He became the United States champion. He would come to the ring, and they did this whole gimmick where Putin gave him, the Russian Federation medal and all this stuff, and they'd come down, they'd have the flag of Russia drop from the ceiling, and they'd put Putin's face on the screen, and everybody would be booing. And I remember sitting there and being like, wow, why are... This is kind of like an old rehash storyline. You have, it's like the Cold War, but the Cold War's over. The Cold War's been over. So, why are they doing this? Why are they putting Putin front and center? And this is 2014, 2015. So in the midst of this storyline, you have MH17 go down. And when MH17 goes down, highly recommend looking up Field McConnell and some of the stuff that he said about this. He knows a lot about planes and flying and some of the stuff that's gone on. If you remember, before MH17 went down, you had MH370, I think it was, which was the Malaysian air flight that disappeared. Remember, they were like, CNN for weeks and months had breaking news, the plane missing still. So if you listen to Phil McConnell, he has some very interesting thoughts about how they were able to do that. But at the end of the day, they blamed Russia for that plane going down. And going back to the WWE at the time, they're in the midst of this hot storyline with Putin as this big villain, right? And the ravishing Russian and Rusev, and they're over like Rover in a hot way, in a bad way, right? So the pressure mounts from the public like it always does on Vince, and they say, Vince, you got to kill the storyline. You have to end this. The Russians shot the plane down. We can't be continuing with this, right? And they had a pay-per-view coming up that following weekend. The plane went down on the 17th of July, 2014, and Rusev would be defending his title that weekend on the 20th in Tampa, Florida, I believe it was, at WWE Battleground pay-per-view. So the big question is, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? They come out and they double down. Lana says that she's going to call out essentially the fake news and the propaganda in America, and calls out the hypocrisy of the media going after Russia and warmongering and all this other stuff, while it was America that went into Iraq, America that went into Afghanistan. So, very interesting. They doubled down on it. They didn't back off. They didn't drop the storyline. They doubled down on it. And they called out the fake news for one of the first times I've ever seen in wrestling. So it was very interesting. Going back to that Lana character, there's a scene, we were talking about it yesterday, Madison Square Garden with JFK, right? His birthday. And that scene's in this video. And what you have is you have Lana recreating Marilyn Monroe's scene, except she's singing Happy Birthday to Barack Obama, and she's singing it in Russian. You have Jerry the King Lawler, who's on commentary, and he goes, reminds me of the time Marilyn Monroe sang to John Kennedy. So you have that nice, interesting little addition into that there, too. So going back, you have MH17 go down. They're stoking the flames of Russia. You have this clown, Ben Rhodes, if you guys remember that idiot. he goes out and he blames Russia and they're going to come out with sanctions. You have Hillary Clinton, 2014, coming out, Russia bears responsibility. And that's really, in my opinion, when this whole Russia narrative began. Then we had to go through all the bullshit with Robert Mueller and all this other stuff that never added up into anything, as we like to call it, Blue Anon, the Blue Anon conspiracy theorists. And, the whole thing with Russia was just overblown. Now, fast forward. What was the date of the video? I told you, 2/22/2020. Now, there's something about these videos where I just have to, I was talking about that pressure sometimes of getting them out. And a lot of times, some of it has like deadlines, like self-imposed deadlines. And that 2/22 was a self-imposed deadline for whatever reason. One of the main reasons that I remember is that was actually also the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice. The Miracle on Ice is what some consider, again, one of the endings to the Cold War, a sign that the Cold War was over when we defeated Russia in the 1980 Olympics in the hockey match. And so you have the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, and you have that date, 2/22. Now, fast forward 2 years later, what happened on 2/22? Well, at 2:22 p.m. exactly, Joe Biden walks out in the White House in front of the podium, and he announces that essentially the Russians are coming, or the Russians came. And it was the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So it was weird. Imagine being me. You made this video about the Russians are coming 2 years to the date, and this guy 2 years later announces essentially that the Russians are coming. So gets a little weirder. WrestleMania 6 in 1990 at the Sky Dome in Toronto, Canada. You had the main event there was Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, who big part of the story later down the line. But there was a scene in this that really caught my attention watching back at it. And that was Steve Allen, who is backstage with the Bolsheviks, which was a Russian tag team in the WWF at the time. And he's about to go sing the Soviet national anthem. And these guys are all proud. They're about to stand up and, sing their national anthem. And Steve Allen, he says something that's very interesting. He starts off on the piano and he goes, "I get no kick from Ukraine." And then the Bolsheviks like, "Hey, that's not the Russian national anthem." But think about what he said. He goes, "I get no kick from Ukraine." And then here we are all these years later. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Bidens getting kicks from Ukraine. We're talking about the Romneys getting kicks from Ukraine. The Pelosi's getting kicks from Ukraine. And as a result now, we're in this massive conflict that we keep funding for Ukraine. So it's very, very interesting. What did the WWE know in 1990? How did they know that this whole thing was going to go down? Or maybe they didn't. Maybe it was just, Steve Allen, spur of the moment thing, and he was just, he just wanted to throw it out there. So we have all that. We have the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, which some say was the end of the Cold War. And, to end the video, we're currently in the Royal Rumble season, right? One of my favorite times of the year. We're on the road to WrestleMania. WrestleMania 1999, WrestleMania 15 was in Philadelphia, PA, 25 years ago. And 25 years this year, it's going to be back in Philadelphia, PA, for the first time since 1999. Now, every year leading up to WrestleMania, they do the Royal Rumble, which is a cool battle royal where the winner goes on and main events for the WWF Championship, or WWE Championship now, in the main event at WrestleMania. And at this year, remember yesterday I was telling you about the corporation and Vince McMahon. That was his little thing that he put together to fight Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Vince McMahon was in the Royal Rumble at number 2. And Stone Cold Steve Austin was number 1. And they ended up being the last 2 competitors in that match, with ultimately Vincent Kennedy McMahon throwing over Stone Cold Steve Austin and going on and to win the 1999 Royal Rumble, which was really the start of a very big year in the career of Vince McMahon on multiple fronts. So, very interesting. He won the Royal Rumble, first non-wrestler to ever do it, last non-wrestler to ever do it. And we had a nice little fun road to WrestleMania from there. So, the video closes with good guy Sylvester Stallone. He was a big WWE fan. You know, Rocky. Vince does this Rocky montage as he's training for the Royal Rumble, which is pretty fun. So enjoy all that and enjoy episode 2 of 4VKM. You can get that at the link below. The Russians are coming! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Released on 2/22/2020. 2 years later. Bad stuff happens. But at the very least, have some fun with this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the new 4VKM podcast channel. Link for that is below as well. And as always, enjoy the show, and we'll see you tomorrow.